Champions in MMA, NBA champion, no boxers.
And that's why you're next.
No NBA champion, no NBA champion, no.
All right, so Jake Paul, is he a real fighter? Do we think he's a real fighter? Does his brother think that he's a real fighter? And does Jake Paul actually believe it himself? In this video, we are going to be looking at some huge, and I'm talking about huge clues from a non-verbal communication, from a limbic system perspective, from what's really going on inside Jake's head that he's keeping to himself and not showing the outside world, that could have massive repercussions, massive consequences into the result of the fight. And that's what we're looking at here. I cannot make anything up. You can't say, oh, believe in Bruce. You know, you like Jake, you don't like Jake. You like his opponent, you don't like his opponent. Okay? I am going to show you exactly what Jake did and did not do, and explain why Jake did and did not do this. And then you can take this neuroscience-based approach and you can investigate it, you can interrogate it, you can leave your comments below. Agree with me or disagree with me, it matters not. I will provide what Jake did and didn't do that anybody can see. It's all there on video. And explain why he done it and explain what this could potentially mean for the fight. Now, this is the first time I've seen Jake rattle so much. And I mean using the word rattled, triggered, psychologically aroused to the point where he may be too aroused. There's something going on here where we haven't seen Jake act, behave, present himself like we're seeing in this press conference. Now, what I like about this is obviously Tommy Fury's gone, at least for the moment. There was a good bit of rivalry, there was some banter. What I'm saying is there was enough external stimuli there that both fighters could get up for the fight. Indeed, I thought Tommy Fury might be too up for it, especially having Tyson and his father in their corner. That can actually increase, that can, you know, set a trajectory where that individual zone of optimized function to get you into the sweet spot is actually over leveraged, yeah? Meaning that you don't perform as well as you could. And we saw this with Anthony Joshua when he was meant to be fighting Jarrell Miller. All right, he pulled out of the fight. You had Andy Ruiz stepped in. Anthony Joshua himself has admitted he couldn't get up for the opponent. I think what Jake's done here could actually be quite clever. So although his opponent, yes, he's got a famous dad, world champion, knocked out Lennox Lewis, etc., yeah? It's like, he's not as big, he's not as popular, etc. as Tommy Fury, but what he is, he's a boxer. He's a real boxer. Jake will know this. Indeed, in the press conference, we see this. There is numerous examples of Jake realizing what I believe from a performance psychological analysis perspective. There is some huge clues that Jake is triggered, that Jake is maybe over aroused. He's presented himself, all right, so he's got Hasim Rahman Jr. to take the place of Tommy Fury. This could be a beautiful technique, although it might be making him uncomfortable in the press conference, and without a doubt, it absolutely is. Could be enough to get Jake into his sweet spot so that on fight night he performs as required. However, in the press conference, what we're going to look at here is we've definitely got Jake's tell. All right, the touch of the nose. Repeatedly, on numerous occasions, Jake presents this when he's feeling uncomfortable. Now, we know from either an idiosyncratic perspective, yeah, from an individual, or from a universal, as in the majority of the population, or any given population, or, you know, if you take a subsection of that population, touch of the nose means that they're uncomfortable at that particular time. The T-junction, the limbic system, the fight-or-flight system, the amygdala, yeah, it is uncomfortable. His nose just didn't get itchy at that particular point, okay? And if you think that you're naive, you're uneducated, go and watch some of my other videos. Again, feel free to disagree with me in the comments, but that's what it means. Look at yourself, watch other people. If you're lying, if you're uncomfortable, if something is making you feel anxious, often you'll just touch your nose like this. And that's what we see repeatedly here. So what I want to do is I'm going to go through the examples of Jake Paul being uncomfortable, bundle that together, as well as Logan Paul being uncomfortable. That's the really interesting part here. You've got a bystander looking at his brother who knows what his brother is capable of, and yet he still feels uncomfortable enough to touch his nose as well. What could that mean? Wait till the end of the video. So what we've got here is numerous displays of Jake being uncomfortable. The first one here is when Hasim actually says, all of your champions, Jake is trying to build himself up. You know, I've knocked out champions. And Hasim quite correctly says, well, yeah, but they're MMA champions. They're past the sell-by date. Yeah, they're not the best version of them, and it definitely ain't boxing kidder. That's really what he's trying to communicate here. And again, I can't make this up. When Jake is challenged by this fact, and this is the key, it's factual. You can't argue with a fact. You will see him get uncomfortable. It's like the rug is being pulled out from underneath his feet, as we see here in the UK. Yeah, and you see that touch of the nose.
The MMA, NBA champion. No, the MMA, NBA champion. No.
Then Jake tries to build a narrative. What's here? The narrative about you keep bringing up the sparring. And actually, when we see Hasim say, quite factually, it's you who keeps bringing up the sparring, there must be some element of truth in there, because again, that's what we get, the touch of the nose. He feels uncomfortable enough to touch that nose. This is the key, okay? He feels uncomfortable enough to touch his nose. What went on in the sparring that he feels uncomfortable enough to touch his nose?
Nothing.
Under the lights.
You be bringing up the sparring. You don't want posted the sparring.
What actually happened between that exchange in the ring, where something is triggering his limbic system enough, where his psychological arousal levels are going to an enhanced level, above that emotional baseline, for him to touch his nose? Well, that's explained. And the third bit here, he's explaining about where he's got one hand, or, you know, Hasim saying, I was only allowed to use one hand wherever it was. And again, sometimes that is quite a common practice, depending on sparring is where you're trying to learn, okay? That's really the foundational purpose of sparring. You're not having a fight as such, although often because of egos, because of desires, because of self-preservation mechanisms, that's where it can go, that's where it can end up. Yeah, mano. But it's not the purpose, okay? But again, when he talks about this, specifically, when he says you turned your back and ran, there's a narrative. I believe Jake is playing out that sparring session in his head, and although you can try to mystify it, that you can put some grey clouds over it and try to make, you know, the public blind to it, because we weren't there. What you see, the autonomous part of the brain, the honest part of the brain, that limbic system, not the prefrontal cortex where we make the lies up. That prefrontal cortex has been challenged now. That amygdala is taken in and saying, hey, I feel threatened. We know he feels threatened because he keeps touching his nose. And when Hasim talks about the sparring, one hand behind the back and, you know, you ran away, boom, you get that touch. I do believe there is a truth that if you had to say who got the better of the spar, actually, I'm going to be more specific here. I'm going to retract what I just said there. All right? Something happened in that sparring that was uncomfortable enough when Jake plays that memory back from the hippocampus. That's where we store, and other parts of the brain, but that's where we store the emotional activities, the memories that we've been through. It makes him uncomfortable enough to touch his nose. It's not a positive sign. It's not an affirmative sign. It's quite the opposite. And again, there's a fourth example here. Now, this was a really wide shot, so the quality is not great, but I had to zoom into it. But that's what you get with Believing in Bruce, the eye of the eagle. And again, Hasim is talking about the sparring, and you'll see Jake come up here. His chicken nose just didn't get itchy at that particular point. I do believe there is a lot of truth in what his opponent is explaining about the sparring session, and that's what we're looking at here. Hasim is actually doing a very good Jake Paul. If you look what Jake Paul done with Tyron Woodley, if you what he done with Ben Askren, yeah, Hasim is actually taking that ability, that central stage, that lighting, etc., away from Jake Paul and doing a Jake Paul on Jake Paul. That's why we're seeing Jake being triggered. He's not controlling the situation, and it doesn't make him feel comfortable. And we see this running out here when Hasim is talking across Jake Paul. Watch for the self-soothe, the tongue inside the cheek. Watch for the lip compression. Watch for all the sides of agitation now that Hasim is triggering Jake Paul. That limbic system is inducing in the moment stress. that Jake could later on, as the fight builds up, endurance training, ruminate over, which is where you get chronic stress. Mike Tyson called it skullduggery. This is exactly what's going on. Mind games is not it's not a made-up thing. All right, it's not something that should be approached with humour. It absolutely impacts either you or your opponent. And if you don't have your psychological state right, you're not going to win, or you're not going to be the best you. If you can impact your opponent's psychological state to decrease their performance potential, to push them across their individual zone of optimized function so they become too stressed to perform, they're not going to be the best version of them. But that's what we see here. Jake Paul being triggered numerous times by Hasim doing a Jake Paul. And again, this is towards the end of the press conference. Watch Jake's walk towards Hasim. Now, eye contact, one of the most strongest, powerful, connecting activities, not just known to humankind, but to any species of animal, that eye contact, yeah? And you'll see him standing there, he's ready. When Jake Paul comes, pretends he's fiddling with himself. You see a lot of fighters do this when they feel uncomfortable. It's called presenting, all right? Reframing. I mean, bow tie, get it sorted there. No need to do that. But it's the fact that he walks towards him with his head down and then comes up. It's like when somebody gives you a compliment and then says, but, okay? Everything from that head up is an act. It's what was happening in that walk up that I believe to be true. And then take this to the now this is interesting, okay? This is when you get an observer's perspective, all right? An observer's perspective. Again, you cannot deny, you cannot say that, believe in Bruce, you are making this up. You can't. They've got the face off. It's Jake who turns away first, okay? It's Jake who turns away first, and he looks down. Looking down is a negative feeling. There's no need to look down. The only thing that is at the bottom of Jake's legs is his feet. He knows where his feet are. Looking down doesn't do anything, okay? So there's a reason why he looks down. But coupled up with this is the observer effect. Yeah? Logan knows his brother better than anybody, okay? Logan's been there for all his fights. He's been in the ring. He's been joyous, fantastic. And, and great props to them as well, I should say. Yeah, I think Jake has done really well. This may trigger a few of you, but I think he's done really well to actually have so little boxing experience and do what he's doing against the opponents he's had on the stage that he is delivering the results on. Okay? Credit where credit's due. But what you get here is Logan's not even involved in an interaction, but he feels uncomfortable enough to touch his nose, just like Jake. And again, you will go around, you'll notice yourself touching your nose now. You'll notice your friends touching your nose. Always view with suspicion someone who's touched their nose. If they've said something and then give the little rub, something's quite not right, okay? But this is what we see from Logan. What is going through his head that he feels uncomfortable enough to display that uncomfortable sign? And again, just watch, it's so quick. Boom, believe in Bruce is on it. Does Logan know something that we don't? Does Logan feel, and again, this might be him self-projecting, we've got to be fair and balanced here, that it could be too much for Jake to take on? So all in all, take those nose touches, those signs of uncomfortable, those signs of being triggered. Hasim taking the limelight from Jake, that walk with the head down, and even his brother looking uncomfortable. Oh, this could be an absolute cracker of a fight. Please remember to subscribe to the channel. Please give us a thumbs up. Leave your comments below. It'll be great to hear. Disagree with this, agree with this, whatever it is, leave your comments, but try to back up why you think or why you're offering your opinion, just like I have. Who do I think will win the fight? I literally believe, and again, this may go against the boxing purists out there, that Jake has just as good a chance of winning as Hasim. I do believe that, okay? I do believe that. It's a bit like Grand National. It's a bit like a unique sporting event. Now, Hasim has probably not been involved before, so that could be detrimental to him. However, what psychological state is Jake bringing? Could be that it was just in this instant he looked really uncomfortable. In the press conference, he was out of his depth because of those triggering behaviours that Hasim was bringing to the table. But what we do know is that they happened. They were there. They were present. And this is going to be an absolute banger of a fight. Hope you've enjoyed the video, but more important than any of what I've just said there, remember to be kind to yourselves and each other.